We'll be talking about in this video the reversal of fortunes in Spaniards to Latin America. It's an article that I found on the Globe and Mail and it was written October 31st, 2012. It was written by Gabrielle Stargater and Paul Day. So I'll be talking about pretty much what this article is about, so I'll provide a summary, I'll talk about how it relates to international business, and I will give my thoughts and opinions. So, for the summary, this article basically is about how Spain is losing people, and specifically losing people to Latin America. As most countries usually believe exports are like natural resources such as oil or lumber, exportation of just normal goods, Spain has been exporting people, as I said before. So basically the issue here is many people are forced abroad as decent paying jobs are becoming a lot harder to find, and pretty much anything that people can find is retail work. So there's many issues with this, but I will address those later. So continuing with the summary though, many people find it strange that people are moving to countries like Chile, Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil, and Ecuador to support a family back home. So Latin America is actually very inviting to people right now, as it has a lot lower cost of living and the developing economic situation is tempting. As 20% of people live under the poverty line in Spain, the Latin America becomes very important as a possible place to move to. And if basically what happens is if Spain doesn't pull itself together, the European Union's fourth largest economic contributor would pretty much fall and affect Europe immensely. So, how this relates to international business. I actually linked this to something in the textbook, which was under international migration. So the textbook definition of migration in this context was the movement of people from their usual residence. So basically what I took this to interpret and how it related to this article was just how people didn't feel comfortable in their own home and they couldn't provide for themselves or their family, so they felt the need to move. Basically, other things that I read in the textbook that had to do with this was that 3% of the people in the world live outside of their country of birth, and that definitely has to do with this article, as I'll explain later. A lot of the people who ended up moving from Spain to Latin America were actually originally from other countries. They weren't native to Spain. And I actually thought 3% was quite low. I thought the number would be a lot higher. Also, an issue in the textbook that is talked about is the tragedy. So what happens is when people move to another country, they're less likely to refuse dangerous work because of things like the language barrier or other things like that. So what I thought was somewhat related was that I think there will be a difference tragedy-wise. There will be a lot less because the language barrier isn't there. They're able to speak Spanish. It's pretty similar, I guess, but there's a lot of Portuguese-speaking countries as well. But they are more likely to refuse dangerous work because they are more knowledgeable and they have had previous work experience in the past. Right. So to talk about my opinion, honestly, I didn't know that the economic situation in Spain was that awful. It had an unemployment rate of 3 times higher than Canada, so it's kind of obvious that people would like to move. I think Spain really should try to retain its young people from leaving because it will affect the economy in the future. So I think what they're doing right now is kind of a short-term fix because they're also cutting back on education. So I think a short-term fix isn't really what Spain needs, though it kind of needs to pull it together pretty fast. This article also addresses how 86% of the 370,000 people who were immigrants themselves, which is what I was saying before. It's actually a really large number. So many of the people who are moving haven't actually grown up really in Spain. So they've either grown up with loyalties to other countries, no political loyalties, or pretty much just desperate for work. So with a percentage that high, my thoughts were, I'm wondering if it's actually questionable of the Spanish government if they're more lenient on letting immigrants leave Spain while keeping native Spaniards and keep giving them more possibilities of jobs. So I'm also just wondering how the movement of people like this is almost similar to nomads, which is what I wrote down, because it's just like people following the herd of animals, but in this case, they are forced to move because of work and they're unable to find anything. So, I actually thought this article was very interesting, and it addressed several key aspects that are slightly related to Canada, but probably won't affect us as much, except for a possibility of increase in Spanish immigrants, though I believe our workforce will probably not suffer something as awful as this.